Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Girly by Sky Society. Today I am chatting with Nalima Touré. She does global creative operations at Bobbi Brown Cosmetics and is an executive producer in the fashion and beauty space, producing campaigns for brands like Cora, Elemis, Vogue, YSL, and Gucci. Welcome, Nalima.
Hello, thank you for having me, Natalie.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to jump into your journey on Marketing Girly. I love to share non-traditional career paths, and I feel like yours is the epitome of that. I'm going from fashion and tech and beauty. We're going to cross a lot of different areas, so I'm super excited to jump into your career journey. But before we jump in, can you tell me a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Thank you for having me, Natalie. I'm super excited to be here and talk to your incredible audience. So, a little bit about me. Let's start from the beginning. I'm originally from Montreal, proud Canadian, and I've been in New York for about 13 years now and just knew from a very young age that this was the city for me from the first family trip that we took together, just feeling the energy of the city and growing up loving fashion and beauty. It was just kismet almost, where you just, when you go to a place and can feel that energy and know, like, I'm supposed to be here, I'm meant to be here. As far back as I can remember, you speaking to the production piece of loving fashion and beauty, I would take magazine pages out of my favorite magazines and plaster them all over my walls. Fast forward to today, seeing my name printed in a lot of, some of those magazines have since folded, but seeing my name printed in physical mags just is such a magical experience, and I'm really excited to share my journey of how it all started and where I am today.
Yay. I think it's really special when I get to talk to somebody that had a dream as a kid and gets to live that dream as an adult. I think that's really rare and really special. Did you know as a kid when you had this passion for fashion, you're cutting up newspapers, like, did you know that this was where your career was going to end up? Or did you just know, like, I want to be in fashion, but I'm not sure where?
So, to be honest, this path has not been linear. I really wish it was, but it's been following, this zigzag all over the place kind of. I didn't really have a map, let's put it that way. So, with that said, I learned through trial and error, and it was knowing what I didn't want kept pushing me in the direction of figuring out what I did want and where I fit in and where my skills would be best used. And, with that said, from the beginning, I always knew I wanted to work in fashion. That was no question. But, growing up in Montreal, my parents being first generation Canadian, my parents were very much with the mindset of you have to follow more of a traditional path when it comes to your education. So going to university was really important to them. And I did that, and I had an amazing time. Went to Concordia, the John Molson School of Business, and studied marketing, which was perfect, kind of a perfect position for me to really see that fashion could be an outlet for me down the road, because marketing, it touches every industry. It just so happened that I wanted, this really beautiful industry that felt a little far away from being in Montreal, but felt a lot closer when it came to majoring in marketing. And so once I graduated, I gave myself some time in Montreal and really thought, okay, I want to work in fashion. Let me give this a chance and see what's possible for me to pursue that dream in Montreal. And, had kind of dabbled in a couple of things like copywriting. I assisted some fashion stylists, and that's actually how I was first introduced to a photo shoot set. And then that was kind of just the beginning of what brought me to where I am today as an executive producer.
I love that. Okay, we're gonna dive into that deeper, but before we do, can you talk to me? We'll start with your executive producer role, and then we'll talk about what you're doing at Bobbi Brown. But you are an executive producer on your own, you have clients. So can you tell me what that is, what that looks like?
Of course. So as an executive producer, really I like to say that I'm a creative problem solver, and a production is like a puzzle. No two puzzles are ever the same, no two projects are ever the same. With that said, a lot of it you have your clients, you have the creative and artists that are going to execute a concept and idea, and then you have me, the producer, that's kind of putting it all together to make sure that the vision comes to life within the confines of a timeline and budget. To put it, as simply as possible. With that said, you have a lot of moving parts. Sometimes you have a small crew if it's, a smaller editorial, or a big crew if it's a shoot taking place over multiple days. And like I said, no two projects are ever the same. So some projects I'll come in and build out a budget, a timeline, work closely with the client to make sure that their photographer, hair and makeup, models and talent are all, who they want to work with within budget, as I mentioned, and within the overall scope of the project and everyone's availability. Those I love the best because you have so many moving parts. It's so much adrenaline. You want to make sure that the client's happy, but you also want to make sure that the artists that you're bringing on board are excited about the creative, are going to be really great partners with you, are going to be proud of the work at the end of the day. And so it's really just, bringing an idea to life and seeing it come to life real time.
That whenever hearing your job, that sounds like such a TV movie star role, like that's what you get to do, just sounds so cool. And doing it in New York just sounds like such a dream. Can you tell me what does the process look like? So does a brand come to you and say, we have this campaign we want to do, and you pitch them your vision for it? What does the beginning part look like when you're working with a new client?
Great question. It really depends, to be honest. A lot of the clients that I have all been through word of mouth. So I have, some really great relationships with creative directors who already maybe have an established relationship with the client and have sold them on the concept. And then now they're at the stage where, okay, we love this concept. We want to see a rebrand. Let's bring it to life. And then that's when they call me to step in to really, figure out how to make that more tangible and really bring it to life.
So the creative director is the person that's more so doing they're maybe coming up with the initial idea for it. And then once that's kind of decided, then they are looking for an executive producer. And then are you the one that's kind of executing everything? Or how does your role fit into it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's pretty much sums it up. I'd say that, with newer clients, sometimes the client will approach me, or the creative director who's working with the client, depending, or it could be an art director as well. With established clients, we've built those relationships, we've shot together, they've seen me work and have seen their concepts come to life under my direction as far as executive production. So that's already established, and they're kind of trusting me to take the reins and make sure we get to the finish line.
So cool. So what do you think are skills that are really required to be successful as doing this production as an executive producer? Because I imagine there's multiple roles that go into doing a creative campaign like that could potentially be really exciting and sound really glamorous and fun to work at, but not every role might be for everybody. So what exactly about being an executive producer do you love, and what are the skills that are necessary for being successful in a role like that?
So I personally love being on set, the energy of bringing this whole concept to life. You're working against a clock to make sure that you're getting all the shots needed, working within the budget, and then you're just managing everyone from the client to the artist to the talent to your PAs to catering, etc. So it's a big adrenaline rush. With that said, I'd say someone who's calm under pressure, definitely a really great skill to have. A lot of the time on my exterior, it's calm, cool, collected. Of course, we can get that done, no problem. On the inside, sometimes some of the requests, you've got a little bit of panic going on, but you figure it out. I'd also say being quick on your feet, thinking of solutions, as quickly as possible. No such thing as no. There's always a way to figure it out. There's always, an avenue that you haven't quite explored to get what is needed on set from the client, from the talent, from the artist. All of your collaborators. And then I'd also say, someone who uses both left and right side of their brain. For me in particular, that's definitely something I I have and I appreciate for my role. Being analytical to be able to manage, a timeline and a budget and be really detail oriented in that way, but then also have that ability to have a creative eye and appreciate the creative direction going on, and also have experience working with different creatives within the industry to know, oh, this is the mood board and the concept. I worked with this, hair and makeup artist, or I worked with this photographer. They'd be excellent, and they would be able to execute exactly what it is you need.
Okay, interesting. And then you mentioned like you do everything down to booking the caterer that's going to be like on site for the shoot. Are there any crazy requests that you've gotten for past campaigns? You can either like tell us the company or keep the company a secret, but I'm wondering like how crazy do the requests get?
That's a great question. I can't take all the credit. I have an amazing team. Like I have an amazing production manager and coordinator who help me with, a lot of the other tasks that are taking place and need to be booked. But as far as crazy requests, nothing to note, I would say. No crazy riders like oysters and only green M&Ms and just this specific type of candle and white walls only. I've heard of many experiences like that, but to date, all of my clients and talent that we've booked have been super easy and incredible to work with.
Okay, interesting. What are some like crazy, so you've heard like is it common for, because I'm imagining like it's a brand, you're mostly working with brands doing shoots. I would imagine like maybe like a celebrity doing a shoot would have like crazier requests versus like a brand be more normal, or is it just kind of not always the case?
It really depends. I mean, you can have a brand, but let's say you have like a really high profile celebrity ambassador that you're bringing onto set. And so, they have their team, they have their needs. You're there to accommodate as much as possible and make sure everyone's happy. That's
okay.
That's
okay. That's how it kind of. Okay. I got it. What have you learned from working on set with other creatives? Because I imagine in setting like this, you've gotten to work with some incredible people. Are there any like key takeaways that come to mind?
I would say across the board, one takeaway that always impresses me is, a lot of these artists have gained so much success, so much notoriety, fame in their industry for what they do, and they're extremely talented and deserve all the recognition. But I'm always impressed when they show up and they're kind and professional, and there's no ego. They're there to create with you and partner with you and still get excited and are just, not fazed by it of like, oh, this is just another shoot and let's just get it over with. Like there's genuine excitement. I also think that part of that is the creative direction. It has to be inspiring for the artists who are coming on board to feel excited by the work and proud of it at the end of the day. But overall, just when there's a kindness on set and just this kind of just feeling like partners in it, is just, that's always one of the takeaways of, wow, this person is at the top of their game and they're just such a pleasure to work with.
Yeah, I can imagine that be really surreal. And also I'm sure makes the process a lot more enjoyable when everyone wants to be there and everyone's being kind to each other, and you can probably be a lot more productive and creative in that type of environment.
Definitely.
All right, let's also talk about what you're doing at Bobbi Brown a little bit. So can you share a little bit about that?
Of course. So I'm on their global creative operations team. And what is global creative operations? In a nutshell, we're overseeing the development of concept through to shooting, content, assets, and campaign, and then overseeing the timeline to launch all of the assets and making sure that the creative team, the production team, and the marketing team are all aligned and following the timeline and processes in place to ensure that we're reviewing assets when they need to be reviewed, we're signing off on them when they need to be signed off on, they're being reviewed by senior leadership, there's alignment with the messaging, we're hitting all of those key marketing messages as far as, the efficacy of a product, the payoff of a product, etc. And then and then putting it out into the world, whether it's through campaigns, social events, in store. You're touching all of those different verticals within the business and overseeing all of those timelines to ensure that you are developing those assets on time and they're going to their stakeholders.
So I can see as you're explaining me like the overlap in what you do as an executive producer to what you're doing at Bobbi Brown's, even though the title are both different. But is that common for like an operations type title for a brand to be similar to production, or is this unique in this case, or is this normally how this works in the industry?
I would say that, production and operations are similar. At the end of the day, it's project management, in my opinion. Whether you're managing, a photo shoot and a timeline and creatives within a smaller period of time, or you're managing a timeline to launch a product from concept to shoot to post-production, it's essentially some steps are needed when it's a longer lead time versus when it's a quick sprint.
Okay, interesting. I'm just like, my brain is kind of thinking of like, okay, if somebody's interested in the production, then operations might be a good fit, or vice versa. And it sounds like these types of positions would be really fulfilling, kind of what you're saying, of getting to be there and see things come to life, and you're being the one that's really driving that. Just sounds like a really, really fun space to be in.
It's definitely a people role as well, because you're interacting with everyone on every team.
Do you have any advice when it comes to developing those relationships? Because it sounds like you said with your executive producing, like that has gotten a lot of your new clients and such have come from word of mouth. So do you have any tips when it comes to building strong relationships?
For sure. When it comes to networking, I feel like that can sometimes have a negative connotation because it can sound very transactional. But overall, I'd say that you just have to be yourself, and you have to be yourself and, communicate who you are and what your services and skill set is with confidence. And so I am grateful that a lot of my clients are return clients and have come back because of the skills and services that I've provided by being myself. And I think that it's because I genuinely love what I'm doing, and I want them to be happy, and I want them to get everything that they want out of this shoot and optimize whatever resources we have. And I think they see that, and I think there's an authenticity there with working doesn't have to be scary. If you click with someone, it's natural, it happens, and that is why they come back, or that is why you form a connection, and that's why it feels easy to talk to them and to go for coffee and to have those follow-ups. So I'd say just, be yourself, be confident, and there's a little bit of fake it till you make it, but overall, it's when you're authentic, people can see that and appreciate it.
I love that. Okay, Nalima, so you have these incredible dream positions. I think a lot of young women would really, really love to work in any of the roles that you have. And it's really, really inspiring to see kind of what you've built, especially talking back from the beginning of just like being this young girl that just has a dream of wanting to work in fashion. So I want to go backwards just for a little bit and talk about how you even got here in the first place. And I kind of want to start by, I know you touched on your education pretty at the beginning, but I kind of want to start there of you went and you got your bachelor's in marketing because that seemed like the right thing to do. And then right after you went and got an associate's in fashion marketing from Parsons. So can you kind of talk about this early part of your career?
Of course, I'd love to. So as I mentioned, I got my BCom in marketing, and I already knew I wanted to be in New York. The whole time I was in university, I would, plan trips there as much as I could for weekends. Every long weekend we had, I was always in New York, just getting inspired and planting the seeds of I'm going to be here one day, like I'm going to move here.
Love it.
And so after I graduated, I mentioned I explored working in fashion in Montreal for a little bit of time, but I still felt that need to go for it. This might date me a little bit, but I was a big fan of The Hills in the City and Kelly Catrone. And she had this book, If You Have to Cry, Go Outside. And I remember I read it one summer on vacation, and she kind of just mentioned, like, if you want to work in fashion, you have to be in those major hubs of New York, Paris, London, or Milan. And I remember reading that and just thinking, I have to give New York a chance because I'll regret it if I don't. So I did my research and, and Parsons is obviously such a famous school with incredible alumni like Marc Jacobs, Tom Ford, Jenna Lyons, etc. So it was just like, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it to the best of my ability and the best place I can and really set myself up for success. So I just decided to apply. I only applied to Parsons. I did not apply to FIT, which, might have been silly of me, but I was like, I'm going to go for it. I took my shot and applied to Parsons, and I got in and, just let my parents know this is my dream. And they have been incredible and supported me, and they were like, go for it. This is what you want. And so I moved to New York, not knowing a single person, but knowing that I was on the right path, and this was, part of my journey, and just, took a really big leap.
That's incredible. Like, literally kind of, I always like the phrase, like, creating your own luck. And I always think it's this, like, yes, you had this dream, as a lot of us do, but you didn't just say, like, oh, it's going to happen, where you weren't, like, passively manifesting that for yourself and just being like, well, if I keep, one day it's going to happen, one day it's going to happen. You were of the perspective of, I'm going to make it happen. You took that risk, which for anybody who's done a change like that when you're young and you're out of college, it's really, really scary, especially going somewhere new and especially taking on a new challenge. All of those things are really scary and really uncomfortable. So it's really cool to see you kind of taking that leap. So tell me kind of what happened next. So you go to Parsons, you study fashion, but I know a couple years later, you kind of were at Microsoft, which we'll kind of get to. So that's like, obviously now you're at Bobbi Brown. So like, let's talk through kind of what happened next after that.
Yes. So this is the part where, I mentioned it's such a zigzag and I wish I had a map, but I'm following my intuition. I went to Parsons, studied fashion marketing and communications. I met incredible people, some of who are still my best friends today. And through that experience, I started interning. It was through some internships where I started to realize what I didn't want to do. And so I moved to New York, went to Parsons, studied fashion marketing, convinced that I was going to work in PR and that's what I was going to do. And I had a really great PR internship and was able to attend fashion shows and work backstage. I saw all of the who's who of fashion and really, really loved it. Like, bright-eyed, big city, seeing all of it in the most incredible ways, but realized that PR was not my calling and that was not where I saw myself. And that's really the beauty of internships, is something that I would highly recommend if you're in a position or a time in your career where you can intern. It's a really great way for you to explore whether or not it's something that inspires you and where you see yourself. You kind of are able to take a look behind the scenes of, you have an idea of what an industry is like, but once you're in it, is it using your skill set? Are you inspired in that space? And you're kind of just trying it on, and if it doesn't fit, that's okay. At least you didn't invest so much of your time. You made great contacts, and then you figure out what the next thing is. So like I said, I interned in PR, and then I still, because I had experience assisting stylists, assisted here in New York as well, in styling and wardrobe. And I did love that, but I knew that I didn't want to be a stylist, but I loved whenever I was on set. And so I didn't know what that meant for me, because I also knew photography was not what I wanted to do. And I didn't really know what other roles there were on set. And then eventually, through the recommendation of two best friends, they one day, I was having this moment of, what am I doing? Where am I going? What's next? And they both mentioned, oh, you should be a producer. And I had no idea what a producer was, or, what their role was on set. And it sent me on this, exploratory journey of figuring out what that was, and then slowly but surely knowing that, okay, this is for me.
I'm curious because I think, well, one is that I want to say I love when you were saying like I was figuring out what I didn't like. And I think that's almost more important. Like instead of trying to figure out what you do like, when you're young, just start to eliminate things, right? You're trying new things. Like you said, try it on, doesn't fit. That's fine, now you know. Instead of like trying to figure out the one thing that you like the magic golden ticket, it's kind of better to like start eliminating roles and stuff. And the only way you can do that is by trying them. Like you're not going to know unless you do it, because certain things are going to sound really glamorous. Like you said, like that PR internship was on paper glamorous. A lot of people probably wanted to have the same internship as you, and then you realize like it wasn't for you. So I love that you were talking about that. I'm curious for other people that might be feeling that, where they're so close. Like you kind of have these like hints of like, I know I'm in the right space, but I just feel like I'm not in the right role, or like you just kind of feel like you're close to what you're passionate about, but nothing has quite clicked yet. Do you have any advice for kind of coming to that realization of what's the role, what's the right fit for you?
So I'd say, as I mentioned, if you're in a position where you can intern, definitely intern as much as you can to help you figure out perhaps what isn't for you or what is. If you have, those inklings of, oh, this feels right, but maybe not exactly, use your network and, blind or cold call anyone in the role that is kind of aligned with where you see yourself, to ask them on a coffee chat date, or just ask them for a couple of minutes of their time to kind of get a sense of how they got into the role that they're in, what it is they do, high level, so you get a sense of, okay, is that where are those the projects that I want to be working on that maybe I don't have visibility into yet, but where I see myself going and would like to work on down the road. I'd say interning, networking, those are some of the best ones, I'd say. And yeah, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, to be honest. Like we've been mentioning a lot, I figured out what wasn't for me to get to what was. And I think if you're lucky enough to find your passion early on within the first few goes, that's incredible. And that's, I wish I had that straight shot ladder of, hitting all of those milestones, but you have to kind of enjoy and trust the process and know that if you have the intention to be successful, whatever your definition of success is, as long as you're working towards a goal, you will get there, and things will you'll gain momentum, or they'll start to materialize and make.
Yeah, I love that. And I hope I love this theme for the episode of really just trusting the process and yeah, following the things that excite you. I'm also kind of talking through your career journey, and you went to Parsons for Fashion. You were talking about how passion is such a driver for what you pursued within your career. And then looking at your career journey, you were at tech for a while, then in beauty, and now you're still very much in beauty. I know you do fashion on your own with executive producing. Was that intentional? Did that feel like a detour? Or can you talk to me kind of about those types of roles? Because I know they're not directly in fashion. I know that's kind of where you started your career wanting to be.
I'd say, New York is an incredible place, and working in fashion is definitely requires a lot of grit and, focus, determination, all the things. I was lucky enough to move here and intern and work in a couple of roles. Eventually I got to a place where I lost a little bit of that spark, and not love for fashion, but I lost a little bit of that excitement, let's say. And with that, the Microsoft opportunity came about in communications, and I just felt like it was time to try something new, because like I said, I wasn't really feeling that jolt of energy that I had when I first moved to the city, and was in a position where, like maybe you want a little more stability. Everybody was moving towards tech at the time, so it felt like something that perhaps I could try out and figure out how to rebrand myself with this tech experience if I wanted to go back to fashion, to have one of these really big names on my resume. So I said yes to the opportunity. And so while I was at Microsoft, I was there for just about 5 years. I was working remote in New York before remote work was even the norm, which was an incredible experience. And I'm so grateful that I had that flexibility. And so, at the beginning, I was all in, learning a new skill, really dove right into the role. And after a couple of years, you hear that kind of inner voice of, what's next, or what do I want? Do I see myself here long term? Do I want to move to Seattle, which is where they're headquartered? It was funny, like I just kind of had a moment of, I'm working remote for this tech company, this major company, Microsoft. I have all of this flexibility. It's really secure, golden handcuffs, as they say. And I'm living in the city of my dreams. All of my friends are creatives. I'm surrounded by, people at the top of their industry in the creative field, and I'm not really doing what I love. And so then that kind of sparked something in me where I was like, I have to start looking again and see what it is that's gonna bring that back. And then that's how I found production, and that's how I really started to get into field.
Can you share, so for those of us that are in a role that feels comfortable, where we're getting that steady salary and nothing's wrong per se, right? Everything's like generally, like it's okay, right? We've all been in relationships like that, right? Where it's just okay, but it's not like what the best it could possibly be. And where you wanted to go, production, is a competitive place to go. Like that's a highly sought after role, I'm imagining, especially in New York. So what were the steps you took, or do you have advice for somebody that's trying to leave a comfortable role that you've now built? I know what you learned on Microsoft helped you later on, but it can be scary being like, I now want to move into a different role and I don't necessarily have direct experience in that space.
Yes. So, it's hard. I think for some people, stability is like, it's what they want. And of course, as a freelancer, you want that stability as well. The way there is different than, having a 9 to 5 and, with all the benefits of being employed full time. With that, if you have the luxury to have, the stability of whether it's a corporate job or a 9 to 5, but there is something in you that's telling you to explore other avenues, whether it's, creative pursuits. I started doing it on the side as kind of like a side project of, I wanted to explore my creativity, and I just started producing creatives with photographers and stylists of, these were projects that they had thought up and they wanted to shoot self-fund themselves because it was something they wanted to work on for their book. And so it just so happened that I was introduced to a photographer duo who I'm actually shooting with this week, funny enough, with Cora. And so I was introduced to them, and I mentioned, I want to be a producer, and, I don't really have any experience, but, if ever you need a producer for something, please let me know. I'd love to work with you in some capacity. So they had an idea for a beauty campaign, and they really wanted to work with a makeup artist. And so they're like, why don't you come on to this? It'll be a small shoot. We really want it for our book, and you can use it in your book as well to start building a portfolio. And it was a beautiful shoot. We shot it, and then they pitched it to, I believe it was Elle Croatia, and it was published. And so that was one of my first shoots that I produced. And then to have that validation of, okay, you're on the right track. Like, this was supposed to be this fun side project of, building your portfolio. Now you're actually seeing your name printed with a producer credit. It was definitely the sign from the universe of, okay, you're on the right track. And I was so happy doing it. Like I could do it for hours and hours. I was so happy, and that also tells you a lot. So I started off doing it as a side project and just a creative pursuit for myself. And then it became a career, which I think for many people that end up working for themselves or building brands, sometimes, taking the leap of leaving it all behind and quitting your job without a safety net might not be the most pragmatic approach, but doing it on the side and building momentum and seeing it grow until you're ready to take the leap and go all in is sometimes the best way to go about it.
Oh, and you started with your friends, right? Like, hey, I'm interested in doing this, and someone's like, well, I've got, this thing I'm doing, like, you can help me. I think we can take baby steps first before we jump off the deep end. I think the same thing with Sky Society. Like I started it while I had a job and then, quit at the point that I needed to. And I think that you can find time, or like you can make the time if it really does matter. And I also loved how you were kind of mentioning that when you were doing this, when you stepped into this production role for the first time, that you felt like you could do it for hours. I think that is the biggest sign that you are on the right path of doing something that you're passionate about. In our accelerator, I always teach that it's really hard to, like, if you're trying to figure out what you're passionate about, that's a really, really hard thing to tackle. But if you chase what energizes you, that's a lot easier for us to understand. And then the biggest, or the simplest way I like to put that always is the work that you can just get lost in that doesn't feel like work that you could do for hours. And if you make that your job, then you will be, I think, what we're all chasing is like loving your job every single day.
It's the best, 100%. And similar to what you say, I call it being in the zone. When you're just in the zone, and sometimes a shoot can be 10, 12 plus hours. And if you still have energy you're pretty tired, but if you still have energy to go back the next day and like, let's do it 110%, that really tells you something, that you're in the zone and you're on the right track.
Yeah, hearing you say that, it was even just giving me chills of thinking about times that I felt that in my work, in my life. And it's such a great thing to follow. If you are like, well, I haven't figured out what I'm passionate about yet. So yeah, like look for the things where you felt in the zone, where you felt like you could work on it for hours. And yeah, you would still have energy to go back. I think that's a great compass.
Yeah. And, everybody has their own special quality and calling. And I'd also say, like, if you're in a role right now where you're not feeling challenged and maybe you're bored or unfulfilled, know that you have a skill set that you can find something where you're in the zone that we mentioned, or, you're getting lost in the work, and you can be happy doing what you love. It's just a matter of taking a chance on yourself and being willing to explore different avenues to find that.
And also understanding that may not be the first job you get right away. I feel like yours is a great story of that. Like it might take time, but doing that self-discovery is gonna teach you a lot. And like you said, like roles that may be non-traditional will help you have a unique perspective, and you have no idea how they're gonna tie back into stuff you do in the future. But the nonlinear path makes sense when you look back at it. But when you're in it, it never makes sense.
It's sometimes when you're in it, you're just questioning what is going on here. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. After Microsoft, you went to Tula, then you went over to Coty, working on Kylie Cosmetics, Kylie Skin, and Skin by Kim. Now, obviously, you're at Bobbi Brown, so you have a lot of experience in the beauty industry as well. I'm curious because I know a lot of girls I talk to that are young, working in beauty also sounds very glamorous. Is there any insight you could share into the industry, or advice for breaking into beauty?
Yeah, definitely. So it's interesting working in fashion and then now moving into beauty, which has kind of become my niche. Feels like such an easy transition, and they really go hand in hand. The beauty industry obviously has blown up in recent years, and it's definitely a very exciting industry to be part of. Another thing though, it's extremely saturated. There's a new brand, a new launch. There's so much going on, but it's exciting to be part of. As far as breaking into the industry, I think if you have fashion experience, that might be a little bit easier because, like I mentioned, they go hand in hand, and there's a creative element to that. But if you have no experience whatsoever and it's first job out of college, like I mentioned, get an internship first to kind of get your foot in the door, start to see things behind the scene, because like with production and being on set, there are so many different roles within a beauty organization, whether it's product development, if you're into the formulations, and maybe you have a science background, that would really lend itself easily to being part of PD or research and development of creating, that gloss with the plumping technology. If you have a finance background, all of these brands have a finance department and accounting. So if it's just about being in the industry, but if you studied accounting, or you have a science background or project management, you can go into beauty. It's just a matter of figuring out where you might fit in. And then let's say you get in the door in one of those categories, but you decide, oh, I want to be in more of a creative role. You have that experience of working for a beauty brand, and perhaps you're doing a little something on the side, whether you have a TikTok or a really big social media following because it's something that you're really passionate about. You can use that and leverage it to get yourself another position at another company, or present it to your current company and say, hey, I'm here. This is something I love to do on the side. I'd love to, explore ideas of maybe partnering with social and brainstorming a content creator campaign, and just see where that takes you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And then how about looking back on your career now that we've kind of gone through and talked about the beginning and like now where you are now? Is there any advice that you want to give to other women in marketing that are working hard at building their marketing careers?
I would love to. So, overall, I'd say trust your intuition. We all have an inner compass that is our own and that is unique to you. So you have to follow those pings that you get, as we mentioned earlier, of something is exciting you. You're not quite sure what it is, but you have to move in that direction because more will unfold as you take those chances. When I was debating staying in my corporate job, when I was debating staying in my job with golden handcuffs, a lot of people told me I should stay and enjoy, being fully employed, having health benefits, a 401k, but I knew deep down that I wasn't meeting my full potential as an artist and now business owner. So the longer I stayed in something that wasn't serving me in the way that I wanted it to, the further away I was getting from feeling fulfilled in my career. And I followed my intuition when I took on creative roles, and I followed that again 8 years later when I launched my own production company, and it was the best decision I ever made. So I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't follow my intuition and take bold risks and trust the process. Overall, hindsight's always 20/20. Whether you're taking big, bold steps towards whatever it is that's your bigger picture or inching closer towards it, as long as you feel deep down that it's the right move for you, you have to trust that. And in the long run, it will all make sense. And it'll all make sense, and you'll see how far you've come when you look back. So just take it day by day and trust the process.
I love that. I feel like I already have our episode title in mind with this theme of this episode. Nalima, your story is so inspiring, and I'm just repeating that, like, trust the process, trust your intuition, trust yourself, and I think those are really, really important things to think about at any stage in your career, especially when you're just starting out. So thank you so much for sharing your career journey and walking us through your career and your lessons learned. This has been such an inspiring conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.